The CDC has the figures proving that their own narrative is wrong. But it suggests that there were probably 30 or more root causes of the crisis. The data suggests that the overdose crisis is largely an unintended consequence of drug prohibition. Ding, 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 these guys get it. This isn't even a correlation-causation fallacy because you don't even have a correlation. And if you kept your noses out of it to begin with, this problem wouldn't even exist. This is a pretty amazing editorial, not only for what it says, but for where it's published. It was published in the Journal of Pain Research. It's an editorial, so it's not part of the peer-reviewed magazine, but it is published up here in PubMed, which is a part of the National Institutes of Health. Now, this doesn't make it like an official position of the NIH or anything like that, but it's still pretty cool that we've got an editorial like this that's actually so prominent here, and just the fact of, mostly where this is and who this gets in front of the eyeballs of. Experts that look through these journals that are going to find out some realities about it, or have already. This is a few years old. See, it's called Today's Non-Medical Opioid Users Are Not Yesterday's Patients. Implications of Data Indicating Stable Rates of Non-Medical Use and Pain Reliever Use Disorder. Gotta love the titles they put in journals. They are not very catchy. What it's saying is the people who are taking opioids for whatever other reason, recreationally or for addiction or whatever, those people did not start out as patients. Today's non-medical users are not yesterday's patients. Doesn't work that way. And it's kind of cool as to who wrote it. You'll notice that name, Jacob Z. Sullum. Yep, that's the same Jacob Sullum that did all those Reason articles that I've gone over. You also have Jeffrey Singer. He's with the Cato Institute and the Goldwater Institute. And he's also at Valley Surgical Clinics. Then we have Michael E. Schottman. Not really familiar with that name. I'm looking, and he's with the Department of Public Health and Community Medicine at Tufts University and Research Network Development at Boston Pain Care, clinical psychologist and executive director of the Foundation for Ethics in Pain Care. So he's an expert on pain management and issues surrounding that, and it really sounds like he's someone who is doing a lot of good. So I'm going to check up on other things he might have written, including scientific studies, because he is published. I'm thinking he's probably the guy bringing in all of the source detail in this, because this is going to reference like a ton of different studies to establish what they're going to say, which is pretty much what we've established in this playlist so far, but just putting it all here in a way that's directly in front of experts and clinicians and everyone else that's going to be reading this is just so good to see. And they start off saying, according to the narrative underlying current policies aimed at reducing opioid-related deaths, the problem can be traced to a dramatic increase in opioid prescribing that began in the late 1990s. And this is supposedly, Purdue and the Sacklers and all that. This trend supposedly was fueled by unscrupulous pharmaceutical company representatives who convinced practitioners that opioids posed a low risk of misuse and overdose, although a recent analysis, and there are all sorts of sources here when you get the, if you're at this link, you can just hover over the footnote, and it'll tell you that this one, for example, is the President's Commission on Combating Drug Addiction and the Opioid Crisis, Origins and Recommendations. But it suggests that there were probably 30 or more root causes of the crisis. You want to know what caused the crisis? It was a bunch of stuff. Politicians and journalists have cited examples of patients who accidentally became hooked on opioids while taking them for pain, such as teenagers with orthopedic injuries who found the analgesics prescribed from them so alluring that they progressed to lives of drug abuse and addiction. And that's from a different report from the President's Commission. Both of these were in 2018, so this would have been under Trump. This narrative drives policies targeting the prescription of opioids to patients in pain. And of course, they say, despite these efforts, opioid-related deaths have continued to rise. I've shown that over and over again. They crack down on the prescriptions. Fewer pain pills prescribed to fewer patients. And what happens? Addiction rates stay exactly the same, and deaths go up. I don't know what else you would need to see the trend. The actual components of the opioid-related death toll are as alarming as they are revealing. Since 2010, deaths involving heroin and fentanyl have risen much more dramatically as those involving prescription opioids, as we've seen. According to the DEA, that category consists almost entirely of illicitly produced fentanyl, as we keep going over, and fentanyl analogs manufactured in Asia or Mexico and smuggled into the United States. And they say adding other drugs to the analysis of the CDC's data makes the role of prescription opioid analgesics appear even less significant. For instance, 68% of deaths involving prescription opioids in 2017 also involved heroin, fentanyl, cocaine, barbiturates, benzodiazepines, or ethanol. Thus, fewer than 10% of opioid-related deaths involved prescription pain relievers without those other dangerous substances. And that's what we've talked about before with polypharmacology. It's opioids and alcohol and other stuff along with it. And that source, if you hover over number 9 there, that's the CDC. The CDC has the figures proving that their own narrative is wrong. They are liars, as I've shown. These trends suggest that non-medical opioid users are migrating from prescription drugs to heroin and illicit fentanyl and fentanyl analogs as legally produced prescription opioids become more expensive and difficult to obtain on the underground market. There is also some evidence that PDMPs have contributed to the replacement of prescription opioid analgesics with heroin and fentanyl. PDMP is the Prescription Drug Monitoring Program, and that's what is pushing people from having safe pharmaceuticals for whatever reason they're taking them. Not only for pain management, but people who want them for recreational purposes or addiction purposes, and they're doctor shopping and that's terrible and we need to stop them from doing that. So what are they doing? They're not staying away from the drugs. They're not stopping getting high. They're not stopping becoming addicted. They're going over to the black market. That's what's happening. So I don't know how much more evidence you could need. It would be reasonable to expect that the increasing prevalence of heroin and illicit fentanyl in drug-related deaths would encourage policymakers to thoughtfully reconsider the relationship. Yeah, policymakers thoughtfully reconsidering. That'll be the day. The relationship between opioid prescribing and deaths involving opioids. The data suggests that the overdose crisis is largely an unintended consequence of drug prohibition. Ding, 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 ding. These guys get it. These guys get it. Here it is. Right here in the journals. They know this. The data sings it every time you look at it. Prohibition provides powerful economic incentives for illicit manufacturers, transporters, and dealers to supply banned substances. I've said this before, and I've even played law enforcement experts and people like that saying this. They talk about, well, we can legalize marijuana because it's relatively safe, but we shouldn't legalize heroin and all these others because they're dangerous. Well, a drug being dangerous is a better reason to legalize it. Because all prohibition does is take all of the decisions regarding the manufacture, distribution, and sale of the drug and puts it in the hands of a criminal black market. And how are they stopping it? All this time, 50 years of the drug war, 60 years, however long it's been, however long they've been doing this, decade after decade, We've still got fentanyl coming in. And Donald Trump thinks that, we can just build a wall and do this and that and crack down on the immigrants and that'll stop the fentanyl coming in. No, it won't. That is not going to stop the fentanyl at all. And even if you somehow managed to make it so that they weren't bringing fentanyl in from foreign countries, fentanyl's made in the lab. It's not like heroin where you need a grow operation. You just need a lab. And if they can set up all these meth labs, in trailers or wherever, just out in the middle of nowhere, they can do it with fentanyl. Does it really matter if the fentanyl is coming in from another country or if it's homegrown? But it's a distraction because we got immigrants we want to get rid of, I guess. Non-medical users also appeared to prefer diverted prescription opioids. Drugs that are stolen, the pharmaceutical form of the drug. And someone steals a shipment or something and sells it on the black market. Or people who are prescribed them for something instead of taking them for the pain, they sell the pills on the black market. Those are the ones they'd rather have because they know what they're getting. Because the pharmaceutical companies make safe dosages. The black market doesn't. But as diverted pain pills became more difficult to obtain in recent years, the black market filled the void with cheaper and more dangerous heroin and illicit fentanyl. Yet, defenders of the standard narrative believe that the population of non-medical users consists primarily of patients who were inappropriately prescribed opioids for painful conditions. Based on that premise, they reason, for lack of a better word, for a very loose definition of the word reason, that reducing opioid prescribing in conjunction with better drug interdiction and expansion of drug treatment should gradually eliminate the problem. Unfortunately, the data do not support that expectation. However good it might sound in your head, that's just not how it works in reality. And so we have data that provide further reason to doubt that the population of non-medical users is largely made up of former patients. The volume of opioids prescribed in the United States almost doubled between 2002 and 2014. Doubling the amount of opioids prescribed does not seem to have had a discernible effect on the rate of non-medical use or the rate of pain reliever use disorder. Conversely, reducing prescriptions has not reduced opioid-related deaths. So this isn't even a correlation-causation fallacy because you don't even have a correlation! To the contrary, it seems to be driving up the death toll by pushing non-medical users toward deadlier drugs. And what do you expect? A more rational approach, based on a more accurate narrative, would emphasize measures aimed at reducing the harms associated with consumption of black market opioids, because those are the ones that are the problem, not the pharmaceutical ones. This ain't Big Pharma. Not their fault this time. Alright, a September 2018 analysis of CDC data going back to the 70s. That's starting soon after the drug war got underway, but about 2 decades before Purdue and other pharmaceutical companies started releasing prescription opioids. Death rates from drug overdoses in the U.S. have been on an exponential growth curve that began at least 15 years before the mid-1990s surge in opioid prescribing, suggesting that overdose death rates may continue along this same historical growth trajectory for years to come. So starting in the 70s, we had this curve going up of drug overdoses, and it's an exponential curve. When they started releasing pharmaceutical opioids, it didn't accelerate that curve. Nor did it decelerate when they started cracking down on them. And when Obama moved them over to Schedule 2, and then he and Trump after him, and now Biden are doing all these crackdowns, and now they're talking about yet another limit in the overall amount of prescription opioids that can be prescribed. What's it done to this growth curve? Nothing. nothing. Still that exponential curve. The epidemic of drug overdoses in the United States has been inexorably tracking along an exponential growth curve since at least 1979, well before the surge in opioid prescribing in the mid-1990s. Although there have been transient periods of minor acceleration or deceleration, the overall drug overdose mortality rate has regularly returned to the exponential growth curve. This historical pattern of predictable growth for at least 38 years strongly suggests that the epidemic will continue along this path for several more years. By contrast, the recent historical variability with which some specific drugs have waxed and waned makes predictions about the future role of specific drugs far more uncertain. Indeed, it is possible that in the future, the drug overdose epidemic may be driven by a new or heretofore obscure psychoactive substance. Because that happened before with fentanyl, didn't it? Fentanyl comes out and overdose rates happen now because of fentanyl, not even so much because of heroin. That's the way it always works, and they don't get the idea. The shift toward heroin and fentanyl is not just a matter of prescription opioid users switching to other drugs. In recent years, opioid users have become more likely to start with illicit narcotics. In a November 2017 study, Cicero et al. Found that a third of heroin addicts entering rehab in 2015 initiated opioid use with heroin, up from just 8.7% in 2005. So let's think about this. They've been saying that the reason why is they get prescribed pain medicine, they take it, they get addicted to it, and they turn it over to the black market. So you stop that. You cut it off. You say, no, you don't get it. What happens? They start using it on the black market. It's just instead of starting it with a prescription, they start it on the black market. They're still starting it. You're not stopping it. Because that's not why it happens. And we've looked at this before. Drug addicts and pain patients are two separate demographic groups with only like a 0.6% overlap or something like that. So the group we're talking about here with the overdoses and everything else, that group is addicts, not pain patients. And so there is no justification whatsoever for putting the screws on pain patients. Americans increasingly have been engaging in the non-medical use of licit and illicit drugs since the late 70s. Some of this drug use may represent self-medication in response to anxiety, depression, alienation, and despair, because we do a crappy job of treating that. They are facing bigger risks today, probably because potency has become more difficult to predict, and possibly because doses have increased and drug mixtures have become more reckless. However, policymakers and the media tend to favor simple explanations and solutions for complex problems because their little brains just can't handle anymore. Their tiny little minds is just all they can deal with. And the opioid overprescribing narrative is no exception. However, as Mencken observed, gotta love it when you put H.L. Mencken into a scientific journal. There is always a well-known solution to every problem that is neat, plausible, and wrong. Love that quote. The standard explanation of the overdose crisis is wrong, and the policies it has inspired are not only ineffective, but harmful. Opioid-related deaths continue to rise, even as many patients in chronic pain have seen their medication dosages involuntarily reduced or cut off altogether. Some, in desperation, have sought relief from the black market or even in self-deletion. Healthcare providers have criticized the imposition of prescription limitations as a misinterpretation of the opioid prescribing guidelines published by the CDC in 2016, and some have criticized the guidelines themselves as lacking a firm empirical basis. The AMA has joined the chorus of critics. We covered that. as a diverse group of pain and addiction specialists who signed a November 2018 letter in Pain Medicine that describes non-consensual tapering policies as a large-scale humanitarian issue. FDA Commissioner Scott Gottlieb has acknowledged these concerns and has taken early steps to address them. Not enough, unfortunately. The current overdose crisis is rooted in the intersection of long-term psychological and cultural trends with the lucrative opportunities offered by drug prohibition. Ending drug prohibition will not curb the growing tendency to use drugs non-medically. However, it will potentially reduce the resulting harm. And we've talked about this before. Drug legalization is not a solution to the addiction problem. It's a solution to the crime problem. It's a solution to the violence problem. It's a solution to the overdose problem. And it's a solution to the mental health problem. And after that, we have to go on to tackle addiction, but we can. Because look at how good a job we're doing with nicotine, which is the most addictive substance that we know of. Short of decriminalization, policymakers should abandon one-size-fits-all intrusions into the clinician-patient relationship. Yeah, aren't we supposed to have, privacy? What do politicians know about what I talk about with my doctor? As an alternative, they should consider prioritizing harm reduction measures such as expanded access to medication-assisted treatment, needle exchange, and supervised injection facilities, and rescheduling naloxone to make it available as a truly over-the-counter drug. And maybe stop pushing naloxone on pain patients because it doesn't work for pain patients. It doesn't stop pain, and pain patients aren't addicted. And also, it's your body. You should have the right to put whatever you want into your own body. This is ridiculous. We've just gotten so far away from that. Healthcare in general, and pain and addiction management in particular, are nuanced undertakings. Current public policies aimed at reducing opioid-related deaths ignore such nuance in favor of ham-handed, empirically dubious, and demonstrably harmful dictates. And isn't that just every government regulation ever? Show me one that considers any nuance. Another one we keep talking about is nuclear energy. Oh no, it's waste and it's radioactive emissions. It's no, it's not. It's perfectly safe. Oh no, 3 Mile Island, Chernobyl, blah, blah, blah. I've got a whole playlist on that too if you want to see it. Ham-handed, empirically dubious, and demonstrably harmful. So many issues I cover on this channel. It's exactly that. That's what they're all about. Government regulation is a sledgehammer, not a scalpel. Americans suffering from chronic pain and those from whom they receive their treatment deserve medical care managed through better informed and more even-handed policy. Just let us decide with our doctors what the best course of action is. And if you kept your noses out of it to begin with, this problem wouldn't even exist. And that means that to all you policymakers out there and all you drug warriors and all you people hyping it up, all of those overdeaths, every single one of them, is your fault. Yours, and not anyone else's. Certainly not pain patients. So deal with that. Look in the freaking mirror and deal with it. Thank you so very much for watching. Comments for the comment God, shares for the share throne. Please hit like, subscribe, and the bell. And of course, donate.bogosity.tv. Please help me keep this channel going. Donate whatever you can through PayPal, Venmo, cryptocurrency, or become a regular supporter at Patreon and Subscribestar. And you can do it on Discord as well. All sorts of benefits you can get, including a monthly live stream that I have to still sit down and schedule for September. We'll see when we can get that going. And then, of course, there's the monthly AMAs, other benefits, so please check those out. Thank you so very much for watching. Until next time, stay strong and be free.